Alrighty, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Darkslayer Reem from Haltesia Gaming, and I just felt like making a video on a topic that I feel is kind of relevant. It's always relevant if you were a competitor. But anyway, it is going to be about handling losses, and I guess in a sense, I'm just going to talk about what is a loss? What is failure? What does it mean to fail as a competitor? Competitor. I can't say that word today. But so for me personally, at what point do I feel that I have really lost at an event? I personally don't really feel like I have lost at an event until I've been eliminated from the event. Because I've noticed that in all events that I go to, regardless of what game it's for, when I'm knocked to the losers bracket, that doesn't really bother me all that much. It's sort of just like, and I shake it off and I just keep playing. And even like when I'm playing in the losers bracket, it doesn't really hit me until like I notice it really hits me when like I've actually lost, when the games are over, when that's it. There's nothing more to be done. I'm out of the event. That's when it really hits me. And like more often than not, it's never a sense of okay, I feel like I'm about to lose. More so, it always, for me personally, it always feels like I'm just playing, I'm playing, and then bam, out of nowhere, it's like, oh, I'm out. That's it. You're done. And like, I'm gonna be honest, that is the worst feeling at tournaments for me. Like it's, because that's the feeling of I can't go further in this event. I can't do any more. There's no resets, there's no retries. I can't, start the level over or anything like that. That's it. You're done. And I have to accept that I've lost. And I'm gonna be real. I don't like losing. Honestly, I don't think there's anyone who really likes to lose. So, but typically how I deal with loss after I've, finished racking my brain and realizing like, wait a minute, this is it, I've lost. There's always that wave of like sadness, that feeling of, oh man, I messed up or whatever it is. And so like typically what I usually try to do is I try to mitigate it. I focus on something else. I try to focus on anything but the fact that I just lost. And I'm gonna be honest, I feel as though a lot of people do that. Nobody wants to be reminded that they lost. Nobody wants to think about the fact that they lost. They want to focus on something else. And with me, I try to mitigate it. I'll usually say something like, well, I can go do this instead now, and blah, 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 blah. I never let my being eliminated from an event be the end of my event. I always try to make the absolute most I can out of every event that I go to. And I personally feel like that's a good way to make the sting of losing a little bit less hurtful, I guess. And because one thing I never do is like, even though like I have like, if it's a game that I'm playing like on my recording setup, which 90% of the time it is because I bring it with me all the time. So if I'm losing and I get eliminated from the event, typically that set is on my recording setup. So if I want to, I can go and watch it right then and there. But I don't want to at that point. I don't want to focus on the fact that I just lost. And honestly, that's just how it is for a lot of people. So now, when I say that it makes you feel sad, like losing is typically associated with a lot of negative emotions, but it's not entirely a negative thing, Sometimes it can be good to lose. And I say this kind of loosely, but like I'll try to explain it best of my ability to explain what I mean when I say that it can be kind of good to lose. Because losing, while it doesn't feel great at all, it's typically a good indicator that you have room left to grow. It's typically something that shows you like, okay, this is an area that you are weak in and you need to work on this. So that's typically the thing I try to take out of whenever I lose, because ultimately, when I lose, like, because I always bring my recording setup with me, there's usually footage for me to study afterwards. So I'll go back and I'll watch the set. I'll look at the things I did, and I'll go over, okay, what if I had done this? Or sometimes I'll even go into, like, going to training mode and lab certain scenarios. And I found that, like, a lot of times it's never really a fact of, oh, there was just nothing you could do, or you were in this scenario and there was nothing you could do. There was always well, not, I won't say always, because sometimes there really are situations where it's just you got put in this situation, you're dead. But more often than not, I find that it's really just a matter of you were put into a rock paper scissors situation and you threw the wrong hand, and that's basically what it comes down to. And oftentimes it's just a matter of you not recognizing that situation you were put in, and that's why you chose the wrong hand. Because, like, for instance, when I'm playing against Sheik, and I know if I notice they're going for down throw, I'm going to know not to try and DI in. I'm gonna know the DI away so they can't get down throw up air on me. And I also know don't air dodge. Because there's usually a number of options you can take in any given neutral interaction. If you lose neutral, there's typically a bunch of different options you can take. If you win neutral, there's usually a bunch of different options you can take. And if you're and this is why it's so good to be able to watch your sets, because then you can actually see, okay, I'm losing because I'm overextending. I'm losing because I'm not converting up properly. I'm losing because I'm picking the wrong options. Blah 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 blah. And losing, the greatest benefit I feel that comes from losing is it gives you a good indicator of what you need to work on. Because me personally, I always try to think about what's happening in the middle of my sets. And I don't try, you don't want to be a player who only thinks about this stuff after they've lost, because then you're going to keep losing. You want to get to the point where you can identify these things mid-set and blah. You want to get to the point where you can identify these things mid-set so that you can, correct them in the middle of the set, so that hopefully you'll be able to turn a losing situation into a winning one. Because all it takes is a matter of, recognizing, oh, they're punishing me for this, let me not do that anymore. Or even another side of that coin is, let's use an example. Let's say you're getting punished for, let me see. Okay, let's say somebody is hitting your shield and trying to cross you up, and you keep trying to shield grab it. If you recognize that, you might decide, okay, wait a minute. They're trying to punish my shield grab every single time with X option, but I can hard call out that option with this option and win because of it. So you might set up the situation and make them think you're going for a shield grab, and then you punish with your option and you win the game. And that's why it's important to be able to recognize habits mid-set. But the way you get to that level is it comes from analyzing your matches after sets, so you can kind of hone that ability. Because the more you look at situations, the more you'll be able to recognize situations. And it doesn't even have to be your sets. It could be anyone's sets. If you're watching, you just want to get into the habit of practicing looking at player habits and honing in on those and figuring out, okay, what option beats this, what option beats that, blah, 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 blah. There's something else I wanted to cover. I really should start doing PowerPoint type things, because this video, I don't script my videos. I just sort of put on the webcam, put on the headset, and I just talk. I probably should start scripting them out, or at least having a PowerPoint, the little bullet thing, so it's oh, this, talk about this. Because there was something else I wanted to cover that legitimately, it's escaping my head right now. Let's see, I talked about the tournament thing, blah, 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 blah. Going over, looking back at yourselves, recognizing what you need to work on. You know what? The sad thing is, I'm going to, end up ending the video, and then I'm going to be as soon as I end it, I'm going to be oh, wait, that's what I want to talk about. I'm gonna count to 10, and if I don't remember it in 10 seconds, I'm just gonna end the video. Uh, hmm. Covered up matchups. I covered up. Oh, okay. So this is semi-related, but basically, it's a matter. It's more so on the topic of like holding your L. Going back to that, recognizing that you lost, and owning up to it, not blaming it on like factors that are somewhat irrelevant. Like I know there's a lot of players who like when they lose, they blame the characters that are being played. You know, and ultimately they like use that to try and go, oh well, what can I do? It's Sonic or it's Rosa or Cloud, blah 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 blah. Instead of going, you know what, I didn't play the matchup well enough. I was doing things that I shouldn't have been doing, and I lost because of that. You got to be able to recognize that sometimes it is your fault that you're losing, and this is something that it's really, really, really hard to do. It's extremely hard to accept that you're the reason why you're losing. It's so much easier to blame, any sort of outside circumstance, whatever it is. It's so much easier to do that. It's so much easier to not take personal responsibility. But the reason why it is important to take responsibility and acknowledge that you are the reason you're losing is because that is how you end up growing as a player. You won't grow as a player if you don't recognize that you need to grow in the first place. You're not going to grow you're not going to get better at the Bayo matchup if you keep telling yourself that you can't win the Bayo matchup. You're not going to get better at beating Cloud if you keep telling yourself that Cloud is broken and blah, blah, blah. Oh, he can just charge limit. Okay. Don't let him charge limit then. Figure out counterplays, or even if you yourself are having trouble figuring out your own counterplay, like look to other players. And even if like you're one of those people who like you don't really do well with talking to people and asking for help, just like study other matches. Because I know one of the things that I do a lot, and I know it's played a huge role into my growth as an Ike player, is I watch other Ike players' matches. And I don't really take it as a sense of I need to do exactly what this player is doing. No, it's just a matter of I'm just analyzing what is happening, what they're able to punish, what they're not able to punish. Just take as much information from it as possible. And ultimately, like you want to just try to put yourself in a position where you're learning as much as you possibly can, because at the end of the day, if you're learning more about a matchup, it's not really a bad thing per se. Now I haven't like Reflex. I remember one time he had an interesting take on it. Was that he feels that a lot of players waste their time learning irrelevant knowledge when ultimately it's not going to come into play in 99.9% of their sets. And I kind of agree with that to an extent. Like if you've not reached the higher level like that, there are certain things you really don't need to be focusing on. Like you shouldn't be focusing on trying to learn wave bounce, footstool, optimized combos if you haven't figured out, how to play neutral. And ultimately, there's not really going to be you can't really get taught neutral. It's just, you can, but you can't. It's a really weird topic to explain. And honestly, I personally think the best way to teach somebody neutral is just to play rock, paper, scissors with them a bunch. Just play rock, paper, scissors with them. And like just simplify the game to like the simplest you can make it. Because like ultimately, fighting games really do come down to rock, paper, scissors in a variety of situations. Where it's a matter of, okay, they're choosing this option, I respond. Which option, or even better, like you both are, like let's say you're both running at each other. You both choose an option. Player 1 beats player 2's option. So, and then another thing that I feel as though a lot of people overlook when it comes to the neutral is that not doing anything is an option. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. You don't even actually have to do anything. Sometimes just sitting there, seeing what option they throw out is the best thing to do. Because ultimately, like, okay, let's put it to like this. You know rock, paper, scissors. You know rock beats scissors. You know scissors beats paper. You know paper beats rock. Let's say you are playing neutral with your opponent and you decide, okay, so at the beginning of the match, I'm going to let them get stage control to see which option they like to go for. If you notice, okay, the match started, he immediately jumped onto the top platform and started charging the limit. Okay, you've got that information stored for later use. So let's say game 2 comes around, you remember that, okay, game 1, he immediately jumped on the platform and started charging the limit. So game 1, you just immediately jump forward and forwarder, and because he jumped on the top platform, he got hit, and now you've got an immediate advantage state. But I feel as though this has got very, very off topic. I tend to do that a lot, tend to ramble. I don't know when to stop talking. So with that, I am going to go ahead and end my video, which was supposed to be about how to deal with failure. So I guess I'm going to just wrap it up, and let's see. So on the topic of dealing with failure, so failure is an inevitable part of being a competitor. Hey, I said it right that time. It's an inevitable part of being a competitor, and ultimately, if you are able to handle your losses better, you will grow at a much quicker rate than those who can't handle their losses. And the best way to handle your losses is to just look at them as a acknowledgement that you need to grow, or acknowledgement that you can still grow. And with that, this is Dark Slayer Reem signing off.